Well, I was speaking at this university and a woman walked up to me with tears coming down her face and she said, "You just saved my marriage." And I said, "Wow, that's pretty dramatic. Do you mind elaborating?" She said, "I came to this conference with the intention of going home and telling my husband, to whom I'm married for 13 years, that I was leaving because he's a pack rat and I have allergies and I couldn't deal with it." And she said, "I never realized until I heard you speak that it wasn't that he wouldn't let go, but he couldn't let go. His mother died when he was 7."
Hello, everybody. Welcome to ADHD and with Jorie Houlihan. I'm Jorie Houlihan, your host, your guide for the dopamine deprived, and a fellow late diagnosed ADHDer. I am very excited about today's guest. I know I am going to learn a lot, so I know you guys are going to learn a lot too. Barbara Hemphill. She asked the question, what if your home or office clutter is just the tip of the iceberg?
Yikes.
All right. So, Barbara, pioneer of the organizing industry and author of Taming the Paper Tiger and Less Clutter, More Life, reveals how physical and digital clutter are often symptoms of deeper emotional and spiritual blockages. Boy, isn't that the truth? With over 4 decades of experience and a global team of certified productive environment specialists, Barbara teaches listeners how to recognize the hidden costs of clutter beyond lost time and space. That is really important. Eliminate overwhelm by aligning workspaces with life purpose. Use organization as a tool for spiritual clarity and legacy building. Turn decades of quote unquote stuff into a platform for peace, productivity, and impact. So, whether you are a high achiever drowning in information or someone facing a life transition, Barbara offers practical, hope filled strategies to help you accomplish your work and enjoy your life. Welcome, Barbara.
Thank you, Joy. Thanks for having me. I love to talk about this and I appreciate the opportunity.
I was really happy we connected because you had mentioned that you also had been diagnosed late with ADHD. And I am always looking for women who have gotten their diagnosis later in life and who have really been able to not just survive, but thrive with it. Because so many of our listeners, especially if they've just been diagnosed or they're kind of just coming to terms with it, they really sometimes think they're never going to see the other side, right? And so when I can show them examples of people who've been able to do it, I'm always thrilled to meet people who've been able to be successful with their ADHD. So I'm very happy you agreed to do this.
Well, I have a story that points out exactly what you're saying. I was
Hmm.
speaking to a group of executive women at a university, and it was just after I had been diagnosed. And I didn't plan to share it from the platform. I mean, this is 20 years ago, so, people weren't really talking about it very much. But when I was on the platform, my heart just told me to tell this story, and so I told the story, and a woman walked up, and the tears were streaming down her face, and she said, "Oh," she said, "I was just diagnosed with it," and she said, "I'm so happy to see how successful you are even though you have it."
Yes, isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
I wish we could feel. I mean, clearly I'm open about my ADHD, but there's so many women that I meet that they're afraid to say something to HR, right? To get accommodations, or they're afraid to tell people because they're worried that they're going to be seen as less than or incompetent. But I feel that the more we can talk about it and normalize what it really is, not what people think it is. Because, they always think it's just, oh, squirrel and losing things. And I'm like, that's kind of the least of my problems with it. But when we can, but when we can openly talk about it, I think, first of all, it normalizes it and it helps allow people to be more authentic. And I think that benefits everybody. So I'm really happy that your heart told you to talk about it because you probably made a huge difference in that person's life. So
Well, it gave her
that's,
hope, and isn't that
yeah,
what we all need is hope? It's
yes,
just in this world, and that I've said that's what I want on my tombstone. She gave others hope.
yes. That's, oh, what a wonderful thing. Oh, let's get to some questions here. All right.
Okay.
So you believe, quote, clutter is postponed decisions. That is an understatement. So for women with ADHD and busy professional lives, What's the first decision you see people avoiding? And then how do you help them move forward?
Deciding that they can thrive in spite of ADHD.
So, how do you help them move forward with that?
We explore this is where we explore the emotional things, what are your fears? What are you afraid of? What do you think might happen? What are you concerned about? And in fact, I have a 5-step process that I use that starts with state your vision. So one of the places I start with clients by saying, "Okay, what's something that has to happen in your life for you to feel happy with your progress?" And then it's like, okay, what would that look like? If you were successful, what would it feel like? What would you be able to do that you can't do now? How would you measure it? And then secondly, we go to state your obstacles. So what have you tried that didn't work? What are you afraid would stop you? Just what are your fears? And then step 3 is commit your resources. How high a priority is this? How much time are you willing to commit to this? How much money or if it requires money? Sometimes it does require money to do it. And then that takes us to step 4. I grew up on a farm and my daddy used to have the phrase where the rubber meets the road.
Yeah.
And step 4 is where the rubber meets the road, which is in order to reach this vision, overcoming these obstacles with these resources, what is your plan? Design and execute your plan. And then that leads to step 5, which is the one where most people fall off the wagon. And I do periodically as well, which is sustain your success. How many plans do you know that work perfectly the first time? So sustain your success means if you're not sustaining your success, it means maybe your vision's changed. Sometimes you start something and you realize, hey, I don't really think I like that. I thought I wanted a horseback ride. And then I discovered that I loved horses, but loving horses and loving horseback riding were two different things. It's like, oh, I think I've changed my goal. And sometimes there's a new obstacle or a new resource. And so it's a framework to help people notice that the common words state your vision, identify your obstacles, commit your resources, design and execute your plan, sustain your success. The bottom line is in Productive Environment Institute, we say organizing is an art. And when people say, "What should I do?" we say that's the wrong question. The
Yes.
question is, what will you do? And we can always figure out a way to get to that vision.
So I love that framework. I find that so often people with ADHD often get stuck in that preparing to prepare mode, right? Where it's like, okay, I'm studying all this stuff and I'm prepping and I'm taking all these courses, but then we don't do anything with it.
Right.
And so I love the rubber meeting the road. I think that is incredibly important. I also really love that you talk to them about their fears, right? Because so many women have tried things so many times and it hasn't worked. And what I usually explain to them is a lot of these you did before you understood your brain, before you knew you had ADHD. And so it's not necessarily that those things don't work. It's just we have to ADHDify them, so to speak, but I think that's really important to say, well, what are you afraid of? And what have you tried in the past? I also loved what you said about how sometimes we just evolve. Maybe we've improved in an area, so we do need to change what our goals are and we need to up our game. That's an amazing framework. I love that.
Well, there's another framework we use, which is the four what is organized, okay? And
Mm,
so the first question so whatever it is, whether you're talking about your closet, the way you get dressed in the morning, or whether you're talking about how you cook meals, or whether you're talking about how you do your work, choosing your calendar, it's a critical tool, critical. I've
yes.
never met anyone that was happy with the way they accomplished their work and enjoy their lives that didn't also have a calendar system that they were fond of. So we have these 4 steps. Does it work? Is what you're doing working? Secondly is do you like it? Because if you don't like it, you won't sustain it. It might work for a while, but you exercise is a good example of that. I mean,
Mhm.
there's a million ways to exercise, and until you
Yes.
find exercise that you enjoy doing, you're probably not gonna sustain it.
Yeah.
Third, and this impacts families and work teams, is does it work for the other people it impacts? And God has a sense of humor. Most of us are married to somebody who has a different idea of what organization is than we do. So that
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yes, exactly. So then there's some compromise, that's involved. And then the fourth one is, can I recover quickly? Because messes happen. Life is messy. Kids and dogs and sickness and all of that happen, and things do get messy. I've always hated, there's two sayings that people often use in organizing. They think, handle a piece of paper only once. That is the biggest lie ever because it does not work. And the
No,
second
that
one is,
I agree on
that's
that.
ridiculous. And the second one is a place for everything and everything in its place. It's half right. There does need to be a place for everything. That is critical. Everything in its place? No, not all the time, but we work with clients to help them figure out what level of clutter they're willing to live with. In my case, it's 1 week. 1 week level clutter I'm willing to work with. And then how long to clean it up. So for me, it's 1 week and 30 minutes. I have a client where it's 1 day and 5 minutes. So everybody has their own level.
Okay, that's so interesting. What level of clutter are you willing to work with and how long? That's a very interesting way of I'm definitely married to somebody who has a very different idea. While I do think he actually has ADHD, he's got some very strong OCD-ish tendencies. So
Good.
clutter really bothers him. And I stop seeing it. It makes a big impact in the quality of your relationships and the stress levels and things like that. So you have to find ways to compromise. So the fact that you talk about now, does this work for everybody that this affects? That's a really great way of looking at it because I don't think everybody adds that component into it. And I think that's really important.
Well, that first framework that I gave you, many of my clients use that to discuss it as a family. So is as
Mm.
a family, let's say, for example, we're trying to discuss organizing the chores and the housework and stuff like that. So you could say, okay, what's our vision for success? What does it mean? You can use those 5 steps. You can say, what would success look like? How do we measure success? Then what are the obstacles? What are the resources? And then as a family, in fact, one of my clients said, we used it to plan our family vacation. They sat down in the family room and used that 5 steps to plan their family vacation.
Very smart. See, people are so creative when they really like let themselves. Sometimes we're so rigid, but when you can take a framework,
Well, that's why we call it the art of organizing.
yes, it's a
That's
very
exactly why we call it that way, because there are no shoulds. Well, I see how critical this is. And I think it, with the introduction of AI and all the things it's doing to us, the amount of information, the technology challenges, the change, being comfortable with your level of organization is more critical than ever before. And I've seen people in our program how it's changed their lives, literally changed their lives and the lives of the people they love. So, and I've reinvented myself many, many times in my business, restructuring the way, I mean, going from physical. I mean, for years, I couldn't imagine organizing anybody if I couldn't be in their physical space. What we've learned now is that actually our clients learn more if we're not in their physical space. We learn kinesthetically. Well, it's an organizing. And so when I was there, I couldn't help myself. I would be doing the organizing. If I'm sitting here and you're doing it, then you're learning better than if I were there doing it.
Yes. Yeah. We definitely have to have, first of all, we have to have some skin in the game. And
Mhm.
second of all, I think this is true for most people, but definitely in my experience with people with ADHD, including myself, we learn better by doing. Where
Oh,
our brains
absolutely.
just absolutely absorb the information better.
Mhm.
It builds that muscle memory and it is so important. And I have to tell clients, for example, and they have kids that have ADHD, and I'm like, you got to make them do the thing. Don't show them how to do it, make them do it. I have to remind them, do you know how it feels when somebody's giving you verbal directions? For me, my brain's like, if there's more than one sentence, I'm not going to remember all of that. And so I'm like, you have to teach them the way they learn. And I wish schools were designed a little bit better in that direction too, if I'm being
Oh, that's
honest.
another whole topic, isn't it,
I
about
know
how
that's a whole
education.
TED talk on its own, right? So, all right. You teach the difference between a finding system and a filing system. So,
Right.
first, can you share what that distinction is? And then, what about that distinction matters so much for neurodivergent thinkers?
Well, first of all, it's very easy to say, the problem with filing is where do I file this? Do I file it under automobile, car, Chrysler, transportation, or vehicle? And,
Yeah.
it doesn't have a right or wrong answer. It could be any of those things. So I came up with the concept very early on. First of all, calling it just changes the way you think about it. It's not where do I file this? It's how do I find this? So that's a mindset change. How do I find this? And then the concept was a file index. A file index is to a filing system what a chart of accounts is to manage your money. You can't
Hmm.
manage your money if you don't have a chart of accounts so that the expense gets charged to the same line item each time, right?
Right.
It's the same with a file. It doesn't matter what you call it as long as you call it the same thing each time. Well, if you only have one drawer of files, that's easy because you can kind of look through the files. But the minute you go to second drawer, automobile is going to be in the top drawer and vehicle is going to be in the second drawer. And so you're going to go to file it and you think it's under automobile and it's not there, but you don't look under vehicle. So you make automobile. And now you got half of the file in automobile and the other half in vehicle. So you solve that by creating an index, and we have actually automated the index. So for people who want to keep paper, and there's a lot of people over 40 yet who like paper and want to keep it, but you can actually index it and have the index on your phone or on your computer. You can search the keywords and tell you where it is in the physical file. So it's like creating a Google search, but it's searching for your physical files or for your storage room or your supply room or your spices or your wine cellar or your garage or anything else. That's a finding system.
That is a really great way to modernize, right? Like having the digital version of it, so to speak. That's so
Right.
smart. That is so
It's
smart. I need to do that because
it's just life-changing, and here's the other thing, this is the critical thing. Today we have a lot of principles, we can somebody in my company calls them Barbara-isms, and this one is today's mail is tomorrow's pile. So whatever it is you're trying to organize, we ignore what you did in the past. Research shows 80 to 90% of it you're never gonna use anyway, so don't waste your time there. Stop the problem. So when people join our program, we ignore everything we did in the past and say, we're going to stop the problem. And we can do that very quickly with the new stuff that comes in. And then you feel, oh, I really can do this. But most people are constantly cleaning up the old stuff. But while they're cleaning up the old stuff, the new stuff is
new stuff
coming
is
in, and if they haven't put a system in, and we use the acronym for system of saving you space, time, energy, and money.
that is so
E-
smart. I love
Every
that.
time, every time you have to do something repeatedly, whatever it is, filing your taxes is a good example. I mean, you have to file taxes every single year. I mean, it's not going to go away, right?
Right.
So when January comes around and you start agonizing about the taxes, that's the time to create the system while you're in the midst of the chaos, because then you can figure out, okay, what can I do so that next year it's not difficult?
Right.
Systems are everything.
They really are. And I always tell my clients, you have to find the things that work for your brain. What works for me may not work for you.
Oh, for
So
sure.
when you are playing around with different systems, first of all, try one thing at a time. We tend to want to jump all in, but also try it for a while because sometimes we try it once and it's uncomfortable and
90
we take,
days. 90
yeah,
days is my kind of my guideline. I mean, it takes about 90 days to figure out. And here's the thing. If you decide to discard it, identify what about it you liked and what about it you don't like. Otherwise, you don't have any way to improve the system.
I do something similar when my clients are saying, oh, this system didn't work. I'm like, well, let's take a look at it. Let's break it down. Like it was working fine until what point? Because
Right.
maybe that just needs to be tweaked. And maybe that part needs to be taken out and replaced, but you don't necessarily have to replace the entire system. So let's try to figure
Good
out
point.
what worked and what didn't. So you're not starting over, again.
That's
So
an
I think,
excellent that's Joy, that's a really and that's a critical factor, it really is to
yeah.
say, "What about it did you like?" Because then we can transfer or feel how to adjust it. I remember one time I was sitting on an airplane, and it was in January, and the woman sat next to me, and she had this beautiful, big, thick leather planner, and she went, and I said, "Wow, that was a big sigh." And she said, "I guess I'm hopeless." She said, "My husband bought me this really expensive planner, and I don't even know where to start." We spent the next 2 hours on that flight taking out things that were in the planner that she really didn't need to use.
Wow.
Decluttering, we basically were decluttering the planner.
Boy, she was so lucky to sit next to you on that
Oh,
flight. My goodness.
she said her comment was, she said, "I think God sent my guardian angel." Oh, the Buddhist saying says, "When the student is
Yes, then the
ready, the
teacher
teacher will
arrives.
come," and she was ready, so
Yes. Oh, that is awesome. Oh my gosh, you changed her life that day. I am certain of it. So how do you approach organization differently for clients who are easily overwhelmed, by paper or the digital or both, sticky notes, any of that stuff? What how do
well
you how do you work with them?
Well, first of all, the question I ask, what is the one thing that has to happen that would most improve your productivity? Because the answer to that is a form of clutter. That answer is a form of clutter.
Mm,
So whatever that is, then that's what we're going to address first, and we'll use that 5-step process. So we'll say, okay, this is what I want to work. And frankly, Joy, for a lot of people, it is paper. The reason I wrote Taming the Paper Tiger was because when I first started organizing, I found that paper was the hardest. It was the most difficult, the most emotional. And when people move, the last thing they deal with is their paper, their boxes of memorabilia and their filing systems and all that kind of stuff. And
yep.
so a lot of times we start with paper. And what I have proven over and over again is if you learn how to do your paper using our finding systems, it will impact everything else because it teaches you decision making, which is what we really teach. Clutter is postponed decisions. But as my business partner, we started working together 15 years ago. And one of the things she said is, Barbara, it's not enough to make a decision. You have to have a way to implement the decision. And that's where we came up with what we call the art of organizing. There's only 3 decisions you can make about any piece of paper: A, R, T, action, reference, toss. And I challenge you to pick up a piece of paper anywhere in your life, and digital is exactly the same premise. That piece of paper either requires an action, you need to pay a bill, make a phone call, schedule an appointment, or I don't need it, but I don't have the guts to throw it away. So that's a reference, or it's a toss. And we teach the art of waste basketry, which is what's the worst possible thing that would happen if you toss this? If you got rid of this or deleted it, what would happen? And then you say, is that a price you're willing to pay? And it's not a moral issue because
Right.
Hemphill's principle is you can keep anything you want if you're willing to pay the price, which is time, space, money, and energy. And as an organizing consultant, it's not our job to say, Jory, you shouldn't keep that. It's our job to say, if you keep it, this is what it's going to cost you in time, space, money, and energy. And only you can make that decision. And it doesn't have a right or wrong answer.
I love that you said that about what is the worst thing that could happen if you throw this away. I find myself asking myself when I'm feeling apprehension or fear about anything, I started to get into the habit of going, what's the worst that could happen, really? Because as I'm sure you know, people with ADHD, we do tend to catastrophize a tad. And so I had to really start doing that. So I wasn't catastrophizing so much about things. I'm like, why do I always go right to the worst case scenario? you know?
Right. Right.
And so that's a really good way to look at it because when we really think about it, we go, oh, what's the worst that's gonna happen? They'll just send me a new bill, or I'll have to go on and print something off. You can almost always find a digital copy somewhere.
Well,
So
and another question to ask that I love is, does this help me accomplish my work or enjoy my life? And if it
Mm,
doesn't, it's clutter and you can't afford it.
yes. Basically, does this serve you? How
Exactly.
yeah. Oh, that is such a good question. That is a very good question to be asking. Many women with ADHD are high achievers at work and then kind of a mess at home. Ask me how I know this. So, how do you help clients create systems that work in both settings? Are there things that they can apply in both, or do they often have to have different systems? Like, how do you do that?
Well, that's a great question. And there's several things to know about it. First of all, the reason people are organized at work is because they get paid to be. If they don't get if they're not organized at a certain level, they're not going to get their paycheck. So accountability is a big factor. In fact, in our
Mm-hmm.
programs, we have found there are three components that have make them very successful. One is a system. You can't clear clutter randomly. And so we have a proven system. It's been used for decades. Secondly, you need accountability. So our program has where we actually do co-working. So we are working together and we
Mm-hmm.
have assistants there who can jump on and if you get stuck. And the third is in community. My mother used to say, many hands make light work. When we're doing this together, it's really easy. So at work, that's sort of built in, right? You have to do it to get paid. You've got colleagues there to do it. So it is. But, and then the other thing is when you get home, you're tired. You're exhausted. You've got to get dinner and you've got laundry and the kids need to go to soccer and all those kinds of things. I mean, it's really hard. But this is where the system is more critical than ever before and it's where working those systems and less is more. I mean, we are just such a society where the stuff comes at us all the time. I mean, it's horrendous. So the principles are really the same. It's just that at work, we tend to have systems and at home, we don't. So then we have to figure out what the systems are. And this is where the family comes in because then it's got to be a system that works for me. And here's the important tip when I first started working with people, they'd come and say, "Let's do my kids' room first." I say, "Nope, we're not doing the kids' room till we do mom's."
Yep.
I cannot tell you how many copies of my books I have not sold because I would be giving singing engagements. I have books at the back of the room for people to buy, and somebody will come and say, "I'm buying this for my wife," or "I'm buying this for my husband." I won't sell it to them. I said, not only will it not solve the problem, it will make the problem worse. Number one, the book will just become clutter because they weren't really interested in it. And secondly, they're going to resent you because you're telling them this is what they need. If you want to help somebody else do it, the best way you do it is to do your own first.
That is very true.
I was speaking I was speaking at a college one time and I made the comment that one of the things I learned that was when people had trouble letting go of things, if I ask enough questions, I would always find that they had had a severe emotional loss in their life.
Hmm.
And when I was done, I was at Barnes and Noble signing it in New York City, and a young man had come up to me and said, my apartment's full of stuff, mostly paper, and I come home from work and say I'm going to sort it. And he said, I become physically paralyzed. And then he looked at me and he said, my mother died when I was 6. Are you telling me I have to deal with the grief of losing my mother before I can organize my paper? And I said, well, I'm not a mental health professional, but I can tell you from my experience that if you find someone you trust, most likely not a family member, who can help you decide, clutter's postponed decisions, right? Help you decide what you need and what you want to keep, you will solve your paper problem.
Mm. Yeah, you're actually making me realize we have my I was in my early 40s, but I lost both my parents within 6 months of each other, and they were only in their
Oh, wow.
60s.
Oh, wow.
And my mom had
Wow.
been sick for 24 years, and then my dad unexpectedly died before she did, 5 weeks
Oh
after she had brain surgery.
my God. I get chills just, I mean, that's like, oh, talk about
It
emotional.
it was a lot, and we still have huge bins of photographs that I just have not been able to bring myself to go through, and every time I've
Yeah.
started to go through a bin, it's hard because I start going down memory lane and da da
Right.
da, and it just doesn't get done. I spend more time doing that than actually like going, okay, is this something we need? And of course, my mom, this was back when you could get doubles of pictures and she got doubles of
Right.
everything. But you're just sort of making me realize that that's probably part of why I'm not
Oh,
getting around
I
to
mean,
that.
and photographs are hands down the most difficult. I mean,
Yeah.
paper is difficult because it represents your intentions and your fears and all that. But photographs are the most difficult because of all the emotion that they represent. You have to go through the emotion. And so most people stop the organizing process because they're not willing to go through the emotion. And when you
Yeah.
realize this is going to be, so then you figure out, how can I support myself going through it? So an example I had was my mother had died and I'd done everything except her jewelry. And she worked at a jewelry store. So the jewelry had really extra, it wasn't expensive. It was costume jewelry, but it was very nice costume jewelry. A friend of mine and a friend of my mother's said to me, "Do you want me to come with you?" Oh, no. Women, we don't want to be a bother, right? We don't want to be a bother. And so
Yeah, we're
no, 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 no,
terrible
I
about
can do it.
asking for help. We are so bad
Yes,
at that.
just
Ugh.
terrible. And I went to do it. And then I thought, well, yeah. So I called her. I said, "Rosalie, I've changed my mind. Could you still come?" She said, "Of course." So she came, and what would have been a really painful experience was a huge blessing because we had a conversation. She knew my mom, and I mean, it was glorious. So the same with photographs. Find someone who will go with you through with it to help you go. But know the emotion is going to come up, and then be willing to go through it. So do it in small bits at a time. Figure out, go back to the 5 steps.
They say that the emotion that you're going through takes, if you don't fight it, it takes about 90 seconds to go through in terms of in the waves, when it comes
Oh,
through to
interesting.
you in waves.
I hadn't heard that figure before. That's interesting.
Yeah. But we are so afraid of it,
Yeah.
because it isn't fun. It isn't painful, or it is painful. But I remember when I heard that and I was like, huh. But it's hard to not try to stop it. That's been my issue because there's so much muscle memory of suppress it.
Well, and also it often comes from the past. I mean, I grew up, my mother, I loved her dearly and she meant really well, but they had 13 cents the day I was born. I lived on the second floor of a tenant farmhouse. And when I would cry, she would say, "That doesn't help anything." And when I
Yeah.
get angry, she would say, "We don't behave that way." Well,
Yeah.
when you stuff sadness and angry, you are going to pay the price, and I paid it big time.
Yeah, my dad was a former Marine. My
Yeah.
dad was very, like I'm one of those
Stoic.
people that when I'm angry, sometimes I cry, which makes me more angry that I'm
Yeah.
crying because I feel like it
Yeah,
takes
right.
away from what I'm trying to say. And my dad would be like, "Ugh." And which of course was like, I'm like, don't do that. But that was
Yeah.
sort of the message is, why are you crying about this? I mean, I think it was just sort of the time period too. We weren't allowed to get angry and
Mhm.
and that kind of thing. And we did, but then we would pay a price for that later.
Well, even
And
the Bible says, "Be angry and sin not." It doesn't tell us not to get angry. It says, "What do you do with your anger?" That's the critical part. And unfortunately, when we don't go through the emotion of anger, we do end up doing things that are damaging because
mhm.
we didn't allow ourselves to go through that anger or
and when
that
you
sadness.
Yes, and when you think about how much energy it takes to keep all of that in, because it doesn't just go away.
Right.
So unless you have a big blowout, fit of some kind or whatever, it comes out in other ways, as you said. And otherwise, it takes a tremendous amount of energy to keep all of that in. And it's not healthy. I'm
Right.
glad we actually talked about this aspect of it because I do think that the emotional aspect of our lives absolutely impacts what our environment looks like. So, and you're making me realize I need to go deal with my parents' death. So, I thought I had, but clearly not. Okay. So, if a listener is feeling totally buried right now, right? What would you suggest would be the single first step for them to take?
Pick one area that they will focus on. Some people do better focusing on some small thing so they can
Mhm.
get a win and then be sure this is critical. Be sure you celebrate your wins. We're not very good at celebrating either. In fact, I've worked
No,
with
we're
lots of
not.
coaches. Well, I work with lots of coaches, and that was something that I didn't do. And finally, not too long ago, within the last couple, maybe in the last year, I realized I wasn't good at celebrating. So I thought, okay. And she was emphasizing it could be a small celebration.
I am constantly telling my clients this. I'm like, we don't have a natural feeling of accomplishment because we're low on dopamine, right? There's just a
Yep,
physiological aspect to that. Most of the time when we finish something, we're just relieved it's over. And so you have to train yourself really to appreciate what you've done and don't compare the size of your accomplishment to what you think other people do. Because what
that's
may be,
exactly right. You are
because what may
so
be yeah, because we
yeah,
may be it may be difficult for us and easy for them, but there are other things that are really easy for us that are difficult for them, and they don't always show you
absolutely.
that.
Yeah,
And but we do
absolutely.
I love that. Yeah, it can be a little thing. I'm always like, do a little dance party or, something,
Yeah,
just something to
yeah.
acknowledge. Give yourself a little pat on the back. I don't care. But
Take a deep breath,
acknowledge
have
it.
a cup of tea, but acknowledge it. That's really so find something that you could be successful at and then celebrate it and do it in smaller pieces so that you don't get so overwhelmed, break it down. And here's one tip for physical organization that makes a huge difference. Let's say you decided you're going to organize your closet. And I believe having your closet organized is one of the critical factors because you're there every morning. If you get up in the morning, you walk into your closet to get things and it's disorganized, you're off to a bad start already. So,
Yep.
organizing your closet is really critical. And one of the things that happens is you'll be in, say, okay, I'm going to organize the closet. And then you find something that goes in another room and you walk in the other room and then you see something else and then you walk somewhere else. It's a disaster. So, I've actually written an article about it, which you can share with your readers. I can send it to you and you could
Oh
share it if
yeah,
you want
please
to.
do.
It's called
Yeah.
making your closet a productive environment. And the key is for every hour of organizing, allow 10 minutes for cleanup, which means you say, okay, I'm going to do the top shelf. If I find anything that belongs in another room, I'm not going there. I'm going to put it in a pile. This is a donate. This is a giveaway. This is a toss. This goes to the garage, etc. You do it until the timer goes off, and then you have the 10 minutes to get
Yes.
those things. It will make all the difference in the world.
Yes, I completely agree, and that's what I teach my clients too. I'm like, have a put away, give away, throw away. And then whatever it is, you put it in one of those things. And like you say, then when you have time yourself doing this too, and then you either, you go put the things away. Don't start trying to organize where you're putting things away. Leave that alone for now.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
because you'll go into another room. You start to go, oh, this is a mess. And then you start trying to organize that. Now you have a mess there and in the last place. And then you're probably going to go find something in
Then
that
you'll
room
give
that's in
up.
another
You
room. And then you're
you'll
going to
say,
do the
"I'm
same thing.
hopeless."
Yeah.
Yep,
And then
and
you're going to
then
be like
and then
so overwhelmed with everything. You'll be like, oh, never mind. And then it's going to be like that for a year and a half.
I mean, for some people, it's been that way for decades until they
Yeah.
figure out that they have to break it into small enough pieces so that they can be successful, they can celebrate, and it reminds me of I saw a thing that said, "What were the 2 words that doubled a company's profits?" It's like, "Oh, what does that mean?" Well, it was shampoo, rinse, repeat.
Ah,
Well, that's with organizing. So it's like I find something and do these steps just like this and repeat. And that's
yeah.
what it is. It's not rocket science, but it is a system that you have to repeat and
Yes.
celebrate when you're successful.
Yes. I want to touch on one other thing too. You talked about accountability. I am a strong believer that everybody with ADHD needs external accountability because we blow through our own deadlines. Like we're not accountable to ourselves, but we're also terrified of accountability. So, how do you approach it when you are encouraging people to get accountability, like you mentioned, if they're feeling that resistance? Because it is a very real fear for a lot of us.
Well, it's kind of like we were talking about needing to go through the sadness. of letting go of things. Okay. So we have to go through the fear and we have to make sure, first of all, that it's something we really want to do. I mean, and if we really want to do it, we have no choice but to go through the fear. So then the question is, how can we do that? What is it that's going to support us to do that? And again, it's an art because it doesn't have a right or a wrong way. Some people, in fact, we have people who David Allen is probably the most well known in terms of productivity in the business world, and Marie Kondo in the residential. We get David Allen and Marie Kondo dropouts because both of them have systems that are very structured
Hmm.
and they work. They absolutely work. No question about it. But there's a lot of people, especially ADHD people, who are just not going to do it. And so
Marie
it's like,
Kondo is the only thing I have stuck with. I actually still fold my clothes that way, but it's because of visually, it's so appealing to me and I can see all my clothes because out of sight, out of mind is a big problem for me. And I'm like, this looks so nice. I love this. And that I will say, out of every system I have studied in my life, which has been a lot, that's the only one I really stuck with.
well,
But
and see
but I
what's fascinating is you've identified because it had to do with the visual
yeah.
component of it. That was a lot, right? So
Yeah.
that's what the strength of our system, I believe, is the art part of it. What will you do? So we say paint a picture of what an organized life is going to look like for you. And then we're going to help you get there. Everybody does a different thing in a different way and pick the pieces that, that do work. The thing that I learned from Marie Kondo that I've applied a lot was she talked about doing things by categories. So instead of doing a room, do all the DVDs or all well, it's like, "Oh,
Yes.
yeah, that makes sense." So I applied that, and she says, "Does it bring you joy?" And one of my clients says, "Well, I have a toilet brush and it does bring me joy, but I'm not getting rid of it." So so, and I think that brings up something else too, is we have to be lighter hearted about this. This is not life or death. We have to humor is
Yes.
really, really important to lighten up ourselves and to give ourselves credit when we're successful and not beat ourselves up. And also what we say to our brain. If you just say, I'm a disorganized mess, instead you say, I'm getting more organized every day, you've completely changed the message you're sending to your brain, which is critical.
Yes, the self-talk is so important. We are
It
our
is.
own worst bully. And when you can start to reframe things like you just said, it really does make a huge difference in how you look at a situation. I always say, look at everything through a lens of curiosity because we're always looking at things through the lens of judgment. And I'm like, judgment just brings more judgment, but curiosity brings answers.
Oh,
And
that's good. I like that. I hadn't thought of it that way. I always looked at it, look and noticing, but I like looking at it in the lens of curiosity. That's really good, Joy. That's very good.
And I think it helps to lighten it a little bit. Like you said, like
Yeah.
we need to have a sense of humor. And I do think people with ADHD actually have a tremendous sense of humor because we've kind of had
We
to.
have to.
Yeah, right? But I think that when it gets into this kind of thing, and this is where all this shame comes up and just all these disparaging things that we say to ourselves. And I'm like, look at it through the lens of curiosity. Be like, oh, this is interesting, whatever it is. And it sort of immediately takes you out of it a little bit because now you're more the observer. You're noticing,
Right.
like you said, and just be like, okay, so why do I do this? What about this is important? What makes me put this here versus over here where it would actually be better? I also tell people don't ask why questions because why questions make people defensive, including when we ask them to ourselves. And they're vague, right? It's too broad. But if you say, what about this, blah, 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 your brain immediately has to find something specific. And
Good
that
point.
then can help you get more clear on whatever the issue is or what you like about something, what you don't like about something. So then when you add that to just being curious about it, it gets you your answers faster, I think. And again, I think it just takes out the judgment so much faster than if you're like, ugh, I'm a mess, like you said.
Yes,
No,
for sure.
first of all,
For
you're a
sure.
spicy disaster. And second of all, it's temporary. You're working on it. And we're all works in progress, right? Nobody,
For sure.
when you stop learning, you die. Like that's just how it works. You're always going to be learning. And so I hope that people understand that just because you're still learning things doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It just means you're still learning, you're still evolving. Like that's our whole purpose is to evolve and improve and learn. And
As-
that includes with this kind of stuff.
And as long as we have breath in our lungs, it's not too late to learn. So,
Exactly. All right. We're going to do the rapid fire round. So I'm going to ask you a few questions and just answer whatever comes to top of mind. All right. You
okay.
ready?
Okay.
Okay. First question. What's your favorite productivity hack that is not in any book?
Sleep.
Love that. Yes.
I mean, most people with ADHD are sleep deprived, and all the research shows that when you're sleep deprived, your brain doesn't work well, you beat yourself up well.
Well, I think you've kind of said already that you're digital, but so paper planner, digital calendar, or sticky notes, like what's your go to?
Well, mine is a digital calendar now because it needs I have a clients that make appointments online and I have a staff. And so at this point, when you have a team working, you're working virtually, you have to use a digital calendar.
Awesome. I'm a hybrid. I have a written planner and I use sticky notes on my written planner and then I also have digital and the main reason for the digital is so for the reminders. And like you, like people have to schedule to like be on the podcast or whatever, but it just, yeah.
Right.
So I have to have both, but I like handwriting things out. My brain just likes that so much better. So, what is your most memorable aha moment a client has ever had?
Well, I think it's something that's happened many, many times, but I think of it vividly. One time, there was a friend of mine actually who lived where I live here in Raleigh, North Carolina, and she always talked about how disorganized she was. And I tried to gift her 4 hours of my service because she was getting ready to start a new job, and I just, as a gift, wanted to get. And she didn't want it, and oh, and she said, "You die if you saw my office." I said, I don't have to see your office." I said, "Put your papers in boxes and bring them to my office." So that's what she did, and, I and then after 2 hours, she was just ecstatic with the results, and I said, "So, I'm curious, why did you wait so long to let me help you?" And she said, "I'd hired 3 organizers in 2 states and paid over $10,000, and I was worse off than when I started."
Oh,
And I said, "So can you tell me what what did we do differently? What's differently?" And she said, "I never understood before that my piles of paper were postponed decisions." And then
that
she said, "You didn't tell me this is what you should do. You asked me what I was willing to do."
that is a big distinction. And I think
Big
that
di
is important, especially with ADHD people. As we talked about before, we don't like being told what to do. That's really cool. I really love that story. Okay. What is something you declutter regularly, even now?
I would say everything. I mean, because we are a society of stuff comes in all the time. And one of the things that's the myth, and people say, "I just want to get organized once and for all." It's not going to happen because in fact, use those first questions at the beginning. 6 months later, you have to ask the same 4 questions and the answer may be different. And it doesn't mean you were doing it wrong before. It means things have changed. So
Yeah.
decluttering is a, well, it's like you don't buy a car and put oil in it once.
Right. Yeah. It's an ever evolving thing.
Exactly.
I
Exactly
agree.
right.
What is the best way for people to get in contact with you?
You can go to the website lesscluttermorelife.com, and that will take you to a 14-minute training that really talks about how to make decisions about paper. And if you learn how to do that, it will impact everything else as well. So just go to lesscluttermorelife.com. And you can always reach me on my website, barbarahemphill.com. I do discovery calls all the time, complimentary, just for people to get them pointed in the right direction.
Oh, that's so nice. All right. Well, I will have all that information in the show notes for everybody. If you resonated with anything today, which I think a lot of us probably did, please follow the show, leave a comment. Tell me, what was your biggest takeaway from today's show? I'm very curious to see what everybody got out of this because there was a lot of great information. Please remember, I say this a lot, but it's important. Pick one thing she talked about today. Don't try to do everything at once. All right. Because it'll get overwhelming. Pick one thing. But there was a lot of really great information today. So let me know in the comments what you got from this or what you're going to try. And then also, please share this with a friend who may also be struggling with the clutter, whether it's physical, digital, whatever, who might also need to hear what we talked about today. Barbara, thank you so much for being here. This was so great. I learned so much from you today. It was really such a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity, Joy, and I look forward to hearing what you were able to do as a result of what you learned today.
Oh yeah, I'm already going, "Oh, I gotta go deal with those pictures." That's I was not expecting that at all in this conversation. I was thinking, digital clutter and decluttering and stuff, and it didn't even occur to me we'd be talking about that. So I will definitely keep you posted on that. That was a
Alright.
very big aha for me. So I appreciate that. All right, everybody, thank you so much. This is ADHD Ann with Jorie Houlihan. Remember, you got to find the systems that work for your beautiful, unique brain. And as always, stay curious.